Looking back, I mean, did you see anything suspicious in the days leading up to her abduction? Did you notice anything? Have you been racking your brains to try to think whether people might have been watching?
We didn't.
If we did, we wouldn't tell you because it may be important information, but we didn't, you know. It was such a relaxing holiday, and in fact, as a family unit, up until that night, and with the friends we were here, certainly for us, it was as good a holiday as we have had with the children, up until that point.
You have to keep believing that Madeleine is still going to be found alive and well.
Absolutely, and we
Do you ever, though, allow yourself to drift towards negative thoughts?
I think in the early days we did, and I think that's inevitable. I think any parent who's been through this does that, certainly in the first few days. We don't now. We're actually a lot stronger, a lot more hopeful now. And we have to be hopeful. It's what keeps us going and keeps us focused.
And what about Sean and Emily? What have you said to them about their big sister?
They're really good. I mean, they're at an age really where they're still quite young, and I guess it hasn't had the same impact on them as if they were a little bit older. They do talk about Madeleine, they pick up things and say Madeleine's, you know, and that's fine, but they're really good.
I think that's, you know, something that many people have said to us, that this is a parent's worst nightmare. And it is, it truly is, and it's as bad as you can possibly imagine. But, you know, if all three of the children had been taken, it could have been even worse than your worst nightmare. And we've got to be strong for them. You know, they're here, they do bring you back to earth, and we cannot, you know, grieve. One, we did grieve, of course we grieve, but ultimately we need to be in control so that we can influence and help in any way possible. Not just Sean and Emily, but the investigation.
Imagine a warm evening on the Portuguese coast. Families stroll by the seaside. Children laugh in the distance, and the scent of salt fills the air. Yet, in a single instant, that idyllic calm is shattered by the piercing cry of a mother. "They've taken her." Those three words, shouted by Kate McCann on the night of May 3rd, 2007, have echoed across the world for nearly 2 decades, carrying with them both desperation and mystery. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is not just another missing child case. It has become one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of the 21st century. What began as a family holiday meant to bring joy and rest quickly descended into chaos, suspicion, and endless speculation. A little girl vanished, leaving behind a trail of questions that still grip investigators, journalists, and the public alike. But what really happened that night? Was Madeleine taken by a stranger lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Or was her fate tied to something far more complex? Decisions made within her own family? Choices that could never be undone? The line between tragedy and crime blurs, and every detail of the case seems to invite more doubt than clarity. This story is not only about a missing child, it is about the golden window of time, the strange disappearance of household items, the behavior of parents under the world's microscope, and the unsettling possibility that the truth may be darker than anyone dares to admit. To understand it, we must step back into that fateful night, retrace the events minute by minute, and confront the uncomfortable questions that still linger. From the outside, the McCanns appeared to be the very picture of stability. Jerry McCann was a consultant cardiologist, a man whose career demanded years of training, discipline, and precision. Kate McCann, a general practitioner, brought the same level of skill and empathy to her work. Together, they represented a family that many admired, educated, financially secure, and raising 3 children with love and care. Their eldest, Madeleine, was 3 years old, while the twins, Sean and Amélie, were just 2. To their neighbors, colleagues, and friends, they were an enviable example of how professional success could coexist with a strong family life. It was against this backdrop that the McCanns planned a spring holiday to Praia da Luz, a small seaside town in Portugal's Algarve region, often called Little Britain because of its large British community and constant flow of tourists from the UK. The resort seemed to offer everything a young family could want. Pools, childcare services, tennis courts, and safe surroundings promise both relaxation for parents and entertainment for children. The choice was not accidental. It had been recommended by trusted friends who had stayed there before. The McCanns were not alone. They traveled with a group of longtime friends and their families, a circle that would later become known as the Tapas 7. These were people they trusted, families who shared the same rhythm of parenthood. Days were spent swimming, sunbathing, and playing tennis, while the children were kept busy with activities tailored for the youngest guests. In the evenings, the adults gathered at the tapas restaurant, just a short walk from their apartments, to share meals and laughter. It was during these nightly dinners that a routine developed. The children were put to bed in the apartments while their parents went to dine. To reassure themselves, the adults created a rotation system of checks. Every so often, one parent would leave the restaurant to peek in on the children before returning to the table. It was intended to be a compromise between freedom and responsibility, but it came with one troubling detail. The apartment doors were left unlocked, a decision meant to make it easier for parents to slip in quietly without disturbing the sleeping children. At the time, it seemed harmless. After all, the resort felt safe, familiar, even welcoming. But that one choice, to leave their children unattended in an unlocked apartment, would become the most scrutinized and criticized decision of their lives. It was a decision that transformed an ordinary holiday into a nightmare that still endures. The evening of May 3rd began like so many others on the McCann's holiday. The children had been tucked into their beds, and Jerry headed off for a game of tennis while Kate stayed behind in the apartment. At around 6:40 p.m., David Payne, a close family friend, and one of the Tapas 7, reported seeing Madeleine alive in the apartment, playing in the living room. It was the last independent sighting of the little girl. By 7 p.m., Jerry was on the tennis court, his presence confirmed by other friends. An hour later, the group began to gather at the Tapas restaurant for their usual dinner. Before leaving, Kate checked on the children. All three, Madeleine, Sean, and Amelie, were safely asleep. This reassurance gave the McCanns the confidence to join their friends just a short walk away. From that point on, their routine of periodic checks began. Parents would excuse themselves from the table, slip into the night, and return minutes later, reporting that everything was fine. But sometime between that last sighting at 6:40 p.m. and the discovery shortly after 10 p.m., Madeleine McCann vanished. This 90-minute interval became known as the golden window of time, the period in which something irreversible must have occurred. Too brief, some argue, for a body to be hidden, transported, and a cover story established. Yet long enough, others insist, for panic-driven decisions to be made. When Kate went to check on the children that night, what she found, or rather, what she didn't find, would change everything. The twins were safe in their beds, but Madeleine was gone. The open window, the curtains swaying, and the absence of her daughter sent Kate into a frenzy. Her cry, "They've taken her," would become forever tied to this case, both as a declaration of abduction and as the starting point of countless theories. The reactions that followed were chaotic. Friends scattered across the resort, shouting her name, while the police were called far later than many critics felt was reasonable. The apartment was not sealed off immediately, allowing people to move freely through the space, disturbing what could have been crucial evidence. And hanging over it all was that haunting question. What had really happened during those 90 minutes? Some insist that the golden window proves Madeleine was abducted by an intruder, a stranger who slipped in unnoticed and vanished into the night. Others believe it was the moment when a terrible accident occurred, and desperate parents, fearing consequences too heavy to face, made choices that cannot be undone. As the investigation deepened, attention turned not only to the timeline, but also to three objects that seemed to vanish in the aftermath: a refrigerator, Jerry McCann's tennis bag, and Madeleine herself. At first glance, a household appliance and a sports bag might appear insignificant, but in the context of a missing child, they took on a far more sinister weight. Reports suggested that Jerry himself arranged for the refrigerator in their apartment to be removed not long after Madeleine disappeared. For investigators and skeptics, this raised a chilling possibility. As doctors, both Jerry and Kate understood the processes of decomposition. They knew that time was their enemy, that a body deteriorates quickly, and that forensic tests could reveal devastating truths. A fridge, cold and sealed, could delay that process, buying them time. It was not just about hiding. It was about preservation, control, and keeping the unbearable at bay until another plan could be made. Then there was the tennis bag. Jerry was known to carry it regularly to the courts, and on the night in question, witnesses saw him with it once again. Large enough to hold a child of Madeleine's size, it became central to theories that the bag had been used to discreetly remove her body from the apartment. What might have looked like a father carrying his sports gear could have masked something far darker. Its unexplained disappearance only fueled suspicions. The possibility of a hidden location added another layer. Praia da Luz was a resort town filled with holiday homes, many of them vacant. The McCanns, well-traveled and socially connected, may have known of places where a body could be hidden temporarily until the chaos of the first hours passed. A spare house, a locked storage space, ordinary and unremarkable, yet capable of holding a devastating secret. Taken together, these missing items created a disturbing narrative. The fridge as a place of preservation, the tennis bag as a means of transport, and Madeleine herself, the center of every theory, gone without a trace. Were these coincidences born from panic and grief, or were they deliberate choices in a calculated cover-up? Theories surrounding the missing objects have never been proven, but they remain etched into the fabric of this case, pieces of a puzzle that refuses to fit together cleanly, and they lead inevitably into the two most extreme explanations for what might have happened that night. Among the many interpretations of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, two theories stand out as the most extreme and polarizing. Each paints a radically different picture of that night in Praia da Luz, and each has fueled years of debate, suspicion, and outrage. The first theory suggests a tragic accident. According to this version, Madeleine may have suffered a fall, suffocation, or some other sudden fatal mishap inside the apartment. Faced with the unbearable reality of their child's death, Jerry and Kate, both doctors, both acutely aware of the finality of death, may have realized instantly that there was nothing they could do. What they did next, proponents of this theory argue, was not guided by logic but by fear. Fear of losing their remaining children, fear of criminal charges, fear of disgrace. The fridge, the tennis bag, and even a possible vacant property nearby take on new meaning here, as tools of a desperate attempt to hide the body until they could decide on their next step. Supporters of this theory point to Kate's haunting first words, "They've taken her," as less of a discovery than a declaration, a way to direct suspicion outward before anyone could look inward. The second theory takes a darker and more sinister turn, the idea that Madeleine's disappearance was tied to abuse or trafficking. Some claim that she, and perhaps the other children, were sedated, a way to keep them quiet and unconscious while the adults dined, or while something far worse occurred. Books on child trafficking found in the McCann's possession have been cited by critics as suspicious, though defenders argue they were part of their broader awareness campaign. The most disturbing suggestion is that her disappearance was not random, but prearranged, that Kate's phrase, "they've taken her," pointed not to an unknown abductor, but to people she already feared or even knew. Both theories are riddled with holes. The accidental death scenario struggles to explain the absence of forensic certainty, while the trafficking theory collapses under the weight of its implausibility. A well-off medical family with no financial needs suddenly complicit in something so monstrous? Yet both theories persist because neither can be completely disproven. They live in the gaps of the case, the unsealed crime scene, the missing items, the delayed police response, and the inconsistencies in the parents' statements. In the end, these two extremes represent more than theories. They embody the public's struggle to reconcile how a child could vanish from a locked or unlocked apartment in a quiet seaside town, while her parents were just a few steps away. For some, it was an accident wrapped in panic. For others, it was part of a crime too dark to imagine. But both remain shadows over the truth, a truth still hidden to this day. In the aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance, the McCanns were thrust into the global spotlight. Their faces filled television screens, their words dissected in endless interviews, their every expression scrutinized as if each smile, pause, or sigh might reveal the truth. But instead of bringing clarity, these appearances only deepened the divide. Jerry McCann, in particular, drew suspicion. Observers pointed to moments in interviews where he seemed to smile at inappropriate times, a subtle expression psychologists sometimes call duping delight. To critics, this hinted at hidden knowledge, even a perverse sense of satisfaction in deceiving the world. His answers were often long, winding, and filled with detail, behavior some experts linked to individuals trying too hard to sound credible. By contrast, Kate's responses were shorter, sharper, more direct. Her grief appeared raw, unfiltered, as if she were speaking not to an audience, but from the wound in her heart. This contrast sparked an unsettling theory. What if one parent knew more than the other? In cases of partnership crimes, it is not uncommon for one partner to lead and the other to follow, either out of fear, loyalty, or ignorance. If Jerry had been more deeply involved in covering up an accident or hiding the truth, his behavior might naturally be more cautious, more rehearsed. If Kate had been left in the dark or had only partial knowledge, her pain might have been genuine and untempered by guilt. Yet others argue that such interpretations are unfair. Nervous laughter, evasive phrasing, and awkward pauses can all be symptoms of shock and trauma. Facing the press day after day while enduring unimaginable grief could cause anyone to behave in ways that appear strange under the harsh lens of public judgment. Still, when placed side by side, Jerry's composure against Kate's anguish, the imbalance became a breeding ground for suspicion. What is undeniable is that their interviews shaped public opinion as much as any police report or forensic test. To some, the McCanns appeared as desperate parents, clinging to hope and pleading for their child's safe return. To others, they seemed like actors in a carefully rehearsed performance, one hiding guilt, the other drowning in grief. The truth, like so much in this case, remains suspended between those two possibilities. Years after Madeleine's disappearance, the case took a new turn with the emergence of a chilling figure, Christian Brückner, a convicted sex offender and serial rapist with a disturbing past. German authorities identified him as a prime suspect, noting his history of violence against children and women, and his known presence in the Algarve region around the time Madeleine vanished. He was not a shadowy theory or a speculative invention. He was a man with a documented record of predation. Satellite data, phone records, and eyewitness reports placed Brückner near Praia da Luz in May 2007. A derelict house, a nearby mobile phone tower, and his known movements in the area seemed to align with the possibility that he could have been involved. His criminal profile made the theory of abduction horrifyingly plausible. For investigators, it offered a chance to redirect the case away from the cloud of suspicion that had long hovered over the McCanns. Yet, even with Brückner's name in the headlines, the questions about the parents never disappeared. Why had they been so quick to declare abduction? Why had they delayed contacting authorities? Why had they left 3 small children unattended in an unlocked apartment in the first place? For some, Brückner's presence only deepened the mystery. If he was truly responsible, why did the McCanns behave in such unusual ways? For others, his criminal record was enough proof. Madeleine had fallen victim to a predator lurking just beyond the walls of their holiday flat. The case, by now, had grown into something larger than the search for a missing child. It became a mirror for society's deepest anxieties: parental responsibility, trust in authority, the fragility of innocence. Some defended the McCanns fiercely, insisting that they were victims twice over, first of tragedy, then of suspicion. Others could not forgive their choices, convinced that negligence or worse tied them directly to their daughter's fate. And still, one phrase lingered, unresolved: "They've taken her." Who were they? A stranger like Brückner? Or was it something more complex, something tied to the very people who cried those words into the night? The answer remains locked in silence, and perhaps will never be known. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann remains one of the most divisive mysteries of our time. For every new lead, another doubt arises. For every suspect identified, another theory emerges. And as the years pass, the divide only grows sharper, between those who believe in the parents' innocence and those who remain convinced that the truth lies closer to home.